Well, we're now joined by Professor Dirk Kotze. He's on the line just to get some reaction on the appointment of Helen Zille as the new DA's Federal Council Chairperson. Good afternoon, Prof. Thank you so much for your time on the SABC News Desk.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
Prof, just a day ago, I heard you saying that this is not a wise move for Zille to run, but she's now gone ahead and won the race. And she's at pains to assure everybody she will stay in her lane, as she calls it, and provide the operational support to the leader. But Professor, given her nature and what we've seen from her, she's used to being very much on the front line, unlike former Chair Mr. James Self, who was more in the background. Given Zille's personality and her sometimes impulsive nature, are we running the risk now of two centers of power emerging within this party?
That is indeed a possibility. And I think the previous interview that we've just seen now is already a good indication how she cannot sort of separate herself from the main policy issues of the party. And I think this is one of the very important changes that she will have to do, is to make sure that the policy makers, in terms of the federal leader, Mmusi Maimane, the federal chairperson, as well as the process within the council, the federal council, that they will take the lead in this debate and not she as an individual person. Because as she also indicated, she's now going to have to chair these meetings. So she can't become one of the leading proponents in some of the debates, but rather facilitating the debate. And I think that's going to be a major challenge for her to change that role from being the leader in the past to being now a facilitator of processes.
Professor, does Helen Zille actually reflect the real debate or the real issues that the party has to deal with right now? For example, we know race is one of them, also building cohesion within the party and really replacing or repositioning themselves as the DA within the political landscape. Is Zille the person to do that?
Well, I think the DA is at a stage now where not one person can actually do it. And that is why the tradition of the DA has been to have more of a collective leadership, that there's three persons at the top, with the federal leader, the federal chairperson, and the chairperson of the federal council and the executive, in order to work together as a collective, together then with the provincial leaders. And so one cannot look at Helen Zille as the panacea for the problems that are at the moment within the DA. And I don't think she can also assume that position or try to assume that position, because that will then unleash the accusations that many people have made about her, as if this is a comeback, as if she's trying to save the DA. And that she wants to, by implication, have not enough confidence in the current leadership. So those are the things that she will have to avoid and do what she actually set out earlier today in the press conference, and that is to be playing the supportive role and playing the role of leading, guiding the organization of the DA, and not so much the political role that it is playing to the outside world.
Professor, we heard Mmusi Maimane call for an early elective Congress and a policy conference, a little bit unexpected. What do you think motivates this call? We know the head of policy of that party resigned recently. It just seems that he wants to garner more direction and clarity on policy going forward.
Yeah, I think if we look at the May election, that what has pushed away some of the former DA members were actually lack of clarity with regard to where do they stand in terms of important policies with regard to employment equity, black economic empowerment, the land issue, and others. At the same time, as you've mentioned, the former head of policy, Gwen Ngwenya, resigned as the head in January this year, just before they finalized the election manifesto for the election. She has adopted a position which is very much the classical liberal one, and which is sort of reflected by the Institute of Race Relations lately in terms of the campaign that they are busy with now. So in a sense, I think what is at stake at this stage is to try to address the diversity that exists in terms of policy opinions within the DA now. And that leads to a lot of confusion amongst the public, the voters, as well as even the leadership within the DA. And I think that is one of the main motivations for the policy conference in the first instance. The fact that they want to have a special federal congress in next year means that they need this preparation of a policy conference. And incidentally, that is actually one of the main functions of the Federal Council, is to deal with policy in between the Federal Congresses. So the Federal Council, now chaired by Helen Zille, will play possibly the most important role in this policy conference, and that they will then recommend policy where necessary to this special Federal Congress. But as Musi Maimane explained, they want to have it before the local government elections. That makes obviously sense, because they don't want to have a repetition of this election where they lost support.
Professor Maimane and Zille were at pains this morning, or this afternoon rather, during that media briefing, to make a public display of support for each other. Now, in the last 5 years, we saw Mr. Maimane really trying hard to take the party through a transition phase, or transformation rather, in terms of composition of the new leadership, in terms of broadening the party beyond the main constituencies of the Western Cape and indeed Gauteng. How much really, of a shared vision to these two individuals now enjoy at this juncture? And how is this going to impact on their working relationship going forward? Are we in, or are they rather in for some stormy days ahead?
Well, what they have presented over the past number of months and maybe even years now lately is to approaches with different emphases. So they emphasize different aspects of the DA's policy. And I think this is where the divergence has developed over time, is that they don't concentrate on the same matters. And they therefore have also different points of emphasis. And I think this is going to be one of the main contestations in this policy conference, because there all of them can speak. I'm not sure whether Helen Zille is going to chair that session. That still has to be clarified. But if she can speak her mind in a policy conference, I think it's going to become an intense debate between the two main sides, or the two main views within the DA. And the one is of a more classical liberalism, and which focus on the individual and on private, the free market, private enterprise, and that it is on the merit of the individual, versus the Musi Maimane emphasis, which is more about how to deal with reparations, how to deal with the legacy of apartheid, and by implication that it has a very prominent racial or group dimension. So that's the main debate, I would say, within the DA, and the policy conference will have to come to some form of accommodation of these different views, because the constituencies of the DA, meaning the voters, also have these different interpretations or these different forms of emphasis. And the challenge for the DA is how to reach a common position where they can accommodate aspects of different of these constituencies in order to have a more integrated party than what they have at the moment.
Professor Dirk Kotze joining us on the line there from Pretoria. Thank you so much for your time on the SABC News Desk. We do appreciate you.